Hi, my name is Nathaniel Mathews-Trigg. I'm a student in the Department of Global Health here. I'm also one of the founders of a group called Radical Public Health, which is a student group that looks at the root causes of many of today's public health problems. I'm also a member of ADU, Academic Workers for a Democratic Union. I want to start by kind of going off what Jill said, that what we're talking about today is nothing new. In fact, these questions have been asked for hundreds of years. And I think there's a very good old Yiddish proverb that speaks to this. The proverb is, "The truth never dies, but is made to live like a beggar." I think there are many scholars who've spoke to today's issues, but have fallen out of our collective consciousness. And that we need to look in the past and find these scholars and find their works, because many of their works are more relevant now than they were in the past when they were written. In Syria, on the border of Turkey, the Kurdish liberation movement has discovered the late Murray Bookchin, who is a Vermont eco-anarchist who wrote extensively about creating non-hierarchical communities. And it's amazing to see that he's been discovered all the way in Syria, and his works, speak a lot to what's going on today here. So I think it's long overdue that we too rediscover Murray Bookchin. I've got a quote here from him that pretty much goes along with what everyone's been talking about. It was spoken in 1990. Quote, "The U.S. Green Movement cannot even bring itself to say with one voice that it is opposed to capitalism, as if truly free markets, green capitalism, and green consumerism are sufficient means for controlling the policies of multinational corporations. They talk about running workshops for corporate managers to encourage them to adopt an ecologically sound business ethics. A left libertarian green perspective cuts through this shallow, reformist, and very naive thinking. It states that corporate capitalism is inherently anti-ecological. Sooner or later, a market economy whose various laws of life is structured around competition and accumulation, a system based on the dictum of grow or die, must of necessity tear down the planet, all moral and cultural factors aside. This problem is systemic, not just ethical. Multinational corporate capitalism is a cancer in the biosphere, rapaciously undermining the work of eons of natural evolution and the basis for all complex life forms on this planet. The ecology movement will get nowhere if it doesn't directly face this fact," end quote. This was spoken 27 years ago, and today it's more relevant than ever. As Lance mentioned, we're entering the 6th mass extinction event on this planet. Permafrost melting in the Arctic North is threatening to release massive amounts of carbon into our atmosphere, which could exacerbate the effects of climate change. This is definitely a crisis, both an economic crisis and an ecological crisis. But isn't that why we're here today? To think of the next system. I'm worried, though, that our dreams will be deferred, not because we didn't try, but because we stopped here. In classrooms, workshops, and in conferences. The time to go into the streets is now. Systems thinking, a novel theoretical framework, which I encourage people to check out, I just recently discovered it, was in a large part developed by a radical environmentalist named Nathaniel Mathews. And she spoke about systems as being, quote unquote, perverse, in the sense that we try to intervene with the best of intentions, but usually with the worst of results. This is because we don't study systems. We instead try to interject in one specific aspect of a system. So whether it's just how we consume things or just who we elect, and instead we need to take a step back and look at the system in a whole. Something else that's very interesting is that capitalism functions as a system and our climate functions as a system. Systems which are currently going through what they call a positive accumulation loop. So for example, our climate is now gaining carbon, threatening climate change. Capitalism is also going through a positive feedback loop in the sense that it's isolating wealth into the hands of very few people, threatening economic instability. So we really need to take a step back and study systems as a whole. Another interesting thing is that systems don't grow linearly. We like to think that, but they really don't. They grow exponentially. There's a great French riddle that really speaks to this. So imagine a pond, and there's a lily in it which doubles in size each day. On the 30th day, the pond is completely consumed by the lily. On what day is the pond half consumed? Anyone? 29, that's correct. The day before it's completely consumed, it's half consumed. And, this is a harder one, who knows how much of the pond is covered on the 15th day, halfway through the exponential growth? This is hard. The answer is 0.0025%. So halfway through the life cycle of exponential growth, the lily is barely noticeable. So we currently, if we look at climate and the economy, we've noticed the effects of this exponential growth. We're long past this halfway point. And how do we know that we're not going to go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow to find this pond we call home completely consumed? So we are living in a crisis. The crisis is now. There is a thinker and writer named Rebecca Solnit who wrote a book called Paradise Built in Hell, which talks about the importance of crises in opening up space for us to experiment in new ways of relating to each other. If you look at Syria and the Syrian civil war, we see that was a crisis that opened up opportunities for people to try to enact in the Rojava Revolution Murray Bookchin's words and ways of organizing society. So if we start to recognize that we're living in a crisis right now, a very extreme crisis, actually two crises, and that they are going to converge very soon, we need to realize that the time to act is now, and that classrooms, workshops, and conferences just won't do it. I got an amazing opportunity at the University of California, Santa Cruz, when I was an undergraduate, to actually be part of a prefigurative experiment. The university system was threatening a 32% tuition increase, and several hundred of us occupied an administration building, not just as a strategic thing, but also as a way to desert this world that we experience today, and hopefully in this space that we capture, create a new world. Unfortunately, what we didn't think of is how systems function, and that in order for us to have a successful movement, we also have to think about growing our movements exponentially. If we think about growing linearly, we're not going to succeed. So in this occupation, we slept on tables, we had to go to class, and there's this constant presence of kind of police repression. So we weren't thinking about how to grow this movement, we were just thinking about how to defend ourselves and not get arrested. I think Occupy Wall Street also fell into this trap. We need to think about reaching out to other people and growing exponentially, not just sustaining ourselves and creating some sort of symbolic action. So let's see. Yeah, so I think to kind of wrap this up is that we need to think about systems as a whole. We need to study them. We need to look for scholars who've spoken to these moments, one of which is Murray Bookchin. And we also need to realize that the time to act is now. It's not in the abstract future, it is now, in the streets, as Lance pointed out. And I wanted to end with the Murray Bookchin quote from his 1989 essay entitled The Death of a Small Planet. Quote, "We tend to think of environmental catastrophes, such as the recent Exxon Valdez oil spill disaster in the Bay of Alaska, as quote unquote accidents, isolated phenomena that erupt without notice or warning. But when does the word accident become inappropriate? When are such occurrences inevitable disasters rather than accidents? And when does a consistent pattern of inevitable disasters point to a deep-seated crisis that is not only environmental, but profoundly social?" Thank you very much.